Welcome to the Athletes in Motion podcast, from race to recovery, with your hosts, Tom Riegel and Kenny Bailey.
We're good. Hey, Kenny, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you?
I'm fantastic. We have a wonderful set of guests today. Want to introduce Mike Davidson, Jen Davidson, and Stuart McDougal. So our ultra swimmers here. We've got, I'm really terrible at introducing people, and I'm probably fumbling through this right now. But let's start with Mike, who's our Olympian, and has got one heck of a background on that. Why don't you introduce yourself, Mike? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Mike Davidson, and 58 years old now, and I've gotten back into swimming thanks to thanks to my wife, Jennifer, and also one of the other guys on this podcast, Coach Stuart. My background goes way back to the 70s and 60s, learning to swim in New Zealand. Grew up on a dairy farm with a river, literally a river running around the bottom of the boundary at the back of the farm. And that's where our swimming hole was. We'd go swim there. And then my sister almost drowned, so my dad ended up building us a pool in the backyard. And long story short, we started swimming in that and actually doing little workouts, many workouts. My mum was my first coach in the mornings before I'd go to school at like 9 years of age. And then we ended up heating that pool. And of course, you go out of that pool. So then you go to the next area and you go into the little town there and you swim in that city. And then they don't have a heated pool. So the next step is you got to find a heated pool. And you end up in Auckland, New Zealand, which is the largest city in New Zealand, which has a lot better quality facilities and that, and you end up going to school there. And as that's progressing, you tend to get a little bit better and start swimming across the Tasman not swimming across the Tasman, but swimming in the country of Australia, which is a smaller country to the west of New Zealand. And you swim there and you do pretty good. And then you end up in California swimming there, and your times improve and you end up, going to the Olympics and then getting a scholarship to swim in school in the United States, like how I met my wife, Jennifer, swimming there. And, it just progresses. But swimming's always been a part of my life, whether I liked it at sometimes or didn't like it. But to bring us up to date now, what's really gotten me involved is Jennifer got back into swimming, it's about 4 or 5 years, she can correct me if I'm wrong, ago with Coach Stuart. And sort of, I wasn't that keen to get back into the water after being gone for so long. I'd had shoulder problems, which distance swimmers tend to do back in that generation of swimming. She was just having so much fun going and swimming with Coach Stuart over there at the LA Valley College in San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. So I got dragged along. I don't want to say willingly at first by Jennifer, but I'm glad that she did. As she's always right, and I actually mean that sincerely. So I went along and I ended up swimming some laps again, and Coach Stewart helped me out with my stroke. I haven't had shoulder issues in the last 4 years, or I think it's about 3 years maybe that I've been back in the water. And I'd been away for 20 something years from swimming. So. It's exciting. One thing's led to another, and of course, what we've all gone through with this, global pandemic. The last, I don't know, what are we, 18 months into it, something like that, maybe longer. The open water swimming has sort of become a daily staple when we're in town. And Jennifer and I just started going and swimming every day in the ocean and thoroughly enjoyed it. We get it out of the way in the morning, and that sort of led to what we're going to talk about later on, one of the open water swims that we did, the bridge to bridge. But swimming is just one of those things. I think I have depression that runs in my family, and I think it's something that it just can really, really help and benefit anyone. We were talking about before we went on, started this, we were talking about sitting on a couch. I did plenty of years doing that with potato chips, watching football, basketball, and feeling sorry for myself. So I think swimming in general, whether it be in a rectangle with, 8 foot of water underneath you, or ocean, a river, which I learned to swim in, it can lead you different directions in your life. And just for your overall well-being, I just think it's a great thing to do. And I'm saying that now that I'm back swimming again. I wouldn't have been saying that 10 years ago, but I know we've got to get going here. But I don't want to bore you with all the details, but I've been very, very lucky with my family, my mother, and particularly my dad too, were just so supportive.
That's
Never
awesome.
had a negative word. So I was I'm just very, very lucky. And Jennifer continues that too. She's a bit of a hard driver some days, but we get to the water every day, and we don't really miss too many, and we actually enjoy it. Yeah. Speaking from myself, anyway, I enjoy Jennifer's company too, so that makes life a lot easier. Yeah,
that helps. Well, we're all kind of connected to Coach Stuart here, and that's the fun part. That's kind of how we brought this together. So I met Coach Stuart, the SoCal Tri Masters Master Swim program at Valley College in Los Angeles. And Coach, we'll have you talk, but as we're going through all of this, we all kind of got back into swimming again with Coach Stu, learning how to swim properly and without injury. And now I'm coaching Kenny those same techniques and things, especially in open water. So, Coach, give us your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Turn my mic on here. I get way too much credit, by the way, but thank you, Mike and Tom, everybody. I mean, it's always great having you guys. Now, I wasn't a swimmer. As a kid, I didn't start, swimming as a kid. I was a hockey player. My parents are Canadians. So naturally, we were on the ice at 2 years old. So I played hockey, all the way up and through to a few years ago. I haven't played in a couple of years, but I played at a high level during school, and I was actually kind of recruited on college teams where I didn't even go to the college. I kind of did these weird side classes where they thought I was going to college. I was playing college hockey when I was about 16, and I actually got. I don't think I've ever told you guys this. The 1980. Maybe I told you, Tom. 1980 Olympic team. With Herb Brooks. Where we beat the Russians, and we won the gold and stuff like that. And it was a really great series. I actually got an invite to try out in Colorado Springs.
Wow.
To skate in front of Herb Brooks. Not that I ever would have made it, but I remember my dad was going to pay for it and stuff. He said, "Oh, you can go. I'll pay for it." And the prior Olympics, we got our butts kicked by the Czech B team. So I was like, we're so embarrassed. I'm like, I'm gonna go with that. I was like really arrogant. And so I passed it up. It was one of my regrets. I wish I would have at least gone to go out there, skate in front of Herb Brooks, because Herb Brooks was one of my favorite coaches. But that's one little bit of trivia about me. I missed that opportunity. But those opportunities open up other opportunities. And I didn't really get into swimming. I got my daughter into swimming first because I didn't really care what she did. She started tennis, and then we got her into swimming, and I had to really drag her kicking and screaming. And then we got her on the swim team, and she started to really enjoy it. And then, she was on the swim team for about, 6-7 years. And we found triathlon through Disney, my day job. They were looking for a relay swimmer. And I said, "Hey, Mandy, you want to try this out?" And she was getting kind of burnt out on the swim team. She started to get shoulder injuries, and a little PTSD with the coaches yelling at her all the time. So it was kind of a nice change. And anyway, she got in there and she just loved it. And then the very next year, then I got into it. So I started swimming. I realized how much of a hockey player I was in the water, right? I would sink like a rock, and it was just awful. But somehow I managed to survive and still, get out of the water and then catch up on a bike and run. But it wasn't until I found a book by accident authored by Terry Laughlin, Total Immersion. And, I've been in swim team stuff, or at least around the language and the approach that they would teach swimmers or coach swimmers. But he talked about something completely different I've never heard of, and more along the lines of science. And I've never heard of these terms. It was one is talking about balance and posture and streamlining the body, really making the body long, being stable in the water, and then having fluid strokes. The shape of the vessel matters more than the size of the engine. Right there, he had my attention. So I read a few pages and, did some practices. And I remember that I had been doing triathlons for a couple of years, and I was doing escape from Alcatraz, which I was like almost the last one out of the water. It took me an hour and 10 minutes to get across the bay. But this year was different. And with those few cues that I got from Terry and just reading his book, I went from about an hour, 5 hour and 10 down to 45 minutes. And the currents were about the same. And so I really had my attention. I was self-taught for quite a while, and I started to get better, more mid-pack swimmer. And then I finally took a workshop, and that kind of completely changed me. And then I got to go to coach training and actually be coached to be a coach by Terry Locklear, which was also a life-changing experience for me, because he kind of broke everything down and really taught swimming from not only the science of swimming, but the physiology of swimming, how a person thinks and how a person responds, the reactive brain versus the conscious brain, and how you can manage those two to get the swimmer more comfortable in water, because we're not built for swimming. We're humans, after all. We learn how to swim. With the exception of Mike, he was a born fish. I just know it. Born dolphin. The rest of us, we have our issues. But then I remember I turned coach, and I remember at that time, Mandy was going to college. She walked away from swimming from shoulder injuries and didn't want to do anything swimming anymore. And I managed to bring her back. I said, let me try you a little bit. Let me try working on you a little bit. And it was just a short period of time that she was swimming like 26 strokes across the pool. She's a fast swimmer, but a lot of strokes, a lot of pain. And she went from 26 to about 12, and she was going faster with no pain. Wow. And I remember she popped out of the water and said, "Oh my God, I've been doing it wrong all these years." I said, "No, we're teaching a little bit differently, and using not only training the body, but also the mind to connect and make those things happen." So long story, I started SoCal Tri Masters shortly after that, really just to build a platform to experiment and observe, right? Because as a coach, and this, all you guys know this, is that you learn so much from observation, but you need to know that what you're knowing, you're actually seeing what you're knowing is really give you some information. And then you came on board, and NBC Tri Team came on board, and then Jen came on board. I remember her talking about her husband. I said, "Oh God, bring him in," but I didn't know much about him. Then I heard about his Olympic background. I said, "Oh my God, I got to get this guy in the pool." And one of the things I noticed with Mike right away, his what we call the aquatic profile, how you naturally set in the water, right? Most of us guys, we typically get, we're almost 90 or 80 degrees, right here. And that's where our hips want to go, right? Yeah. Mike, he floats like a butterfly. He just floats, right? And I remember being, damn, man, I'm so jealous. But it was so great to have, Mike at that caliber. We've had very novice swimmers all to former Olympians, and you find how connected we are and how similar human patterns are there, whether you're just starting out in triathlon, just starting swimming, all the way to a former Olympian. Those terrestrial impulses, those terrestrial patterns are there in all of us. And we work on those things both mentally and physically to get them into a better place than they were before, regardless of the levels. And that's what's so cool about swimming. So now the only thing I'll do is coach. It's my go-to relief. It's for some people it's going swimming 2 miles. For me, it's going coaching 2 hours, on deck, or I just had a private lesson I just got this one student past breathing, or getting into that breathing without breaking posture, and how happy they are because they've turned off that primal reactive brain, and now they're taking control and steering their own ship in the water. So This is what I love to do, and I'm happy to be part of and honored to be part of your podcast with these wonderful people here.
Yeah, and the great thing about the SoCal Tri Masters was the welcoming environment. Just because there was people who had never swam before in their entire lives to Olympic swimmers, we had such a wide breadth of swimmers, and everybody was super supportive of everybody else. There was not this, "Oh, we're in the fast lane, you're in the slow lane," anything. And the way you mingled us back and forth so we could learn off one another and kind of go through all of that just made this such a great learning environment. And it was just, the energy there was awesome because everyone came and wanted to learn. We were always on, we were always functioning with that. And that was, your coaching style brought that with it. But also Jen was a huge cheerleader on this. She's, you've coached as well. You're a 7-time All-American at Bama, at Alabama, and also, Olympic distance tries, and you've done all this great stuff. You're a legit, solid, like amazing swimmer, badass on your own right. And having you there as helping coach everybody else, because one of the things that Coach Stu would have us do is coach one another. And that helps us visualize what we're actually seeing. And you get people who are very new, like trying to give Mike tips, right? Well, how's it look? Well, I don't know, Mike, your head's a little high. Right. Yeah, sure. Right. It's perfect. Right. It looks great. But it was enabling us to actually engage with one another on a different level and look at different things. And Jen, you were a huge part of that. I mean, that you brought tons of energy to that class, and that was awesome. So give us more of your background. Run through that.
Well, my background, I'm from Florida, North Palm Beach, and I grew up swimming at our country club.
We won't hold that against you.
Right.
So it's not like a cow pond. So
not all day. And they say with sports, your kids will like the sport where they find their friends. And that's just where I found friends and just kind of went through. But I had my first coach was all 6 lengths right arm backstroke, 6 lengths left arm backstroke, 6 lengths right arm freestyle. So drills. So I loved that. And then my next coach that took me until I went off to college was pretty amazing. And what I kind of found, I think I almost instinctually knew, to swim smarter, not harder. Like when streamlining really came in and the dolphin kicks came in, I'm thinking, if you can streamline and dolphin kick and get, a couple yards ahead of everybody else, that's free, just dive in the water correctly. And that doesn't cost you anything. It's not energy. So I had all that going into University of Alabama, and I was a backstroke. I've never been a great freestyler until Stuart, and just, loved the swimming there. But then Mike and I segued into triathlon when we were about 27, 28 to we're about 30 something.
Tell them about when we first started riding our bikes.
Yeah, we started riding the bikes on the sidewalk, around the village, with our helmets out. And like we were complete novices, like we knew how to swim, but that was it. And then even with the running, I figured out with a heart rate monitor because I couldn't keep up with people. And I found I had like exercise-induced asthma due to mold and mildew. So the humidity just would kill me. I couldn't breathe. So I had to like relearn all that stuff. But I've always been a thinking athlete, and I try to get that with people. And that's why I think I really connected with Stuart, because you go to his practice, first of all, when it's 60 degrees, 50 degrees at night here, we were in that 85 degree learning pool, which was wonderful. Yeah. And those sets, like, I was like, I'm in, because Mike and I were done competing, doing a master's group. Like you said, everybody in the first lane, they find out you were a college swimmer. If they find out I was an Olympian, it's like the competitiveness we were kind of done with. It was more like, we just want to do what we want to do well, and the chips fall where they may now. And so meeting with Stuart, and he was immediately got my freestyles. I said, I always drop my elbow, and I've just been so horrible at it. Put a pull buoy on me and I don't move. And he just picked up on one. Well, first it was the head position, because I was training. I would always look at the bubbles of the person in front of me to keep up. So the first thing we did was get that head straight down, and made a huge difference. And then all these other little things, he's like, you need to do this. I was like, I thought I was. He's like, yeah, but you've taken how many hundreds of thousands or millions of strokes? It's incremental. And with the patience of Stuart, the patience of a saint, I might add, because it is broken down. The method that he teaches is broken down to where he would want me to, you demonstrate this. And I was like, I don't think I can break it down to that much of a nitty gritty. I just seem to be able to put it together. But anyway, so we did the triathlons, and Mike encouraged me to do more. Like I did a half Ironman, which I didn't. I was a drop dead sprinter, is what you call it. Like I could do a 50 was my event at Alabama, and that's where I was like 6th at NC2As, and then 7th in the 100 and 9th in the 200. But anything more than 3 laps of training was like, I don't want to do this. So my bucket list became, I wonder if I'm capable. I wonder if someone like me is capable of running a marathon or doing a half Ironman. And I really learned that when heart rate monitors came out, we put the heart rate monitors on, to do it at your own pace, whoever you are, go with what you can do, and to really block everybody else out. Because the minute you start trying to keep up with a group run and you're not able, I had found out the hard way that I was always training anaerobically. I don't think I ever trained aerobically. And so it took a lot to learn how to do that and then to do it correctly. So with the swimming, with learning the total immersion method was so much thinking. I tell people, if you come to our practice, it's not like we're going to go 10 100s and we're going to do all this speed work. It's going to be mentally tiring at the end. You're going to put the tempo trainer on and you're going to have it going beep, beep, and you're going to get your arm in there. And then you're going to count your strokes. And then you're going to see if you're putting your hip forward as the arm goes in. And you're just like, you know, but it's been so incredibly helpful to go from, like we took that break after swimming. Then I did triathlons. And then actually what I found out what my calling was, I think was cycling, because we would go out on all these group rides. And I was always one, I'm going to take my pull. I'm never going to be one of those people at the back that they never take their pull. I can't.
Good on you.
And that's probably because of the swimming background. And that was the personality being a little driven. So you'd always be
competitive, just a little competitive.
Well, there'd be like 10 guys. Like we had some really, really talented cyclists in South Florida. And that they were like, hey, you should segue into cycling. And I was like, bike races? I don't know. And I did those criteriums and you know that. But then Mike convinced me to ask a team out of Tampa if I could like be on a team, because I was doing it all by myself and just showing up at a race. And you learn that, you know, criteriums and stuff, you better be a part of a team. Yep. And I joined that team. And then, gosh, Mike encouraged me to go to Olympic trials. He goes, you need to do Olympic trials in 1996. And I was like, you got to be a Cat 1 rider, dude. I think women start at category 4 and maybe I was a category 2, and you had to learn how to do velodrome racing. You had to do criteriums. You had to do road race. You had to do time trials. You had to place. You had to do all this. And we were under this crunch to like qualify. And I did. So I went ahead and like, why not? But when I was there on the starting line, I'm looking around at these people you're reading in Velo News magazine, like I so do not belong. But that experience was quite amazing. So after years of finishing that, and then I think when my son was born, I was 36, and the cycling.
Coconut Grove criterium.
Yeah, I want to pro race.
Nice. legit.
Yeah. I didn't want to be in the mix. I'm 5'9", so the girls, you know, your climbers are these petite little girls that go do up the mountain. And then we had their sprinter, and she was like a Mighty Mouse. She would get in there and, you know, use those elbows and throw them. And I was like, so I was like, I got the big bottom girl. So it's like, just get on my wheel and I'll take you guys where you want. And then I am out of here. And I was quite happy with that position, because I'm like, I got enough accolades. I don't really care. But if I can help a team, this is like the coolest thing ever. So totally enjoyed that. But then once Jake was born, you know, out there on your bike, sometimes it's kind of dangerous and people are going close to you just to be funny. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm a mom. So I stopped everything, ran for weight control, because we still always have those, you know, eating habits of athletes. And then terrible arthritic knees made me stop. And we went off of everything. Mike and I gained a lot of weight. And 17 years later, when I met Stuart and lived like 5 minutes from the pool, and went to that first practice, I was like, this is it. This is easy. It's fun. I have to think. I can correct my stroke. And I tell people, even out in the ocean, you know, take a focal point. Always a focal point. And I get that from Stuart. And sometimes I might have 2 or 3 focal points, but when you're beginning, you take a focal point and focus on that. And any of us could give somebody a focal point. But when we did the swimming, Stuart was like, you got to get out in the open water, Jen. And this was before Mike lived here. Background, Mike was 4.5 years not out here when I was here, because our son is doing the acting and we just couldn't get him out here. So I was trying to tell him about Stuart before he even moved out here. And I got a wetsuit and it hung in my closet for a full year before he got me out in the ocean. And it was in May, but I do remember the temperature that day. The ocean temperature was 58.
Nice.
So cold. I can't believe
it's chilly.
I know. And I hate cold water, but we did. And then I really let it go for a while. And then there were some group swims, and then Tom, and we would all go out and do those. And then during the pandemic, Mike just woke up one day. It was in June of 2020. He goes, we're going to swim in the ocean every day. I was like, okay. And we just did. And that's just been amazing to take everything that Stuart's taught us. The pool is definitely different than the ocean or the lake. That kind of swimming. It is, I guess, Stuart, you could probably correct me, but I feel like there are other things, you know, currents and waves and chop and getting that high side arm up and all those sorts of things. I was like, whoa, this is a little, and how you drift apart from people out in the, I don't know if that's same in the lake, but you can start with somebody and then by the time you take a breath and look at them, they're like, how'd they get all the way over there?
Yeah, you still get a little bit of that waves and things like that, but I think that's where and Stu, you can talk about some of the sets and training that we did where we change gears, right? Where we mix up sets, or we do a 75 where it's, you know, slow, medium, fast, and then back again, where we go back and forth to getting used to switching gears like that. When you get into open water, you take all of that knowledge and you put it together because you're based on a wave or something coming through. That's where you have to shift gears. Now you have to, you know, short the arm stroke a little bit just to get through the wave, and then you can get back in your stroke. And you can touch on maybe a little bit of that on that transition out to open water.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, changing gears is always, I mean, it's good for pool and, you know, open water, really anything. You know, what I find a lot of, you know, triathletes, even, you know, more, you know, experienced triathletes, they all swim at this one speed. And, you know, I mean, while that's good, I mean, you do have your comfortable, you know, zone that you fall into depending on your distance, but it's good to mix it up, right? And, you know, if you remember some of those sets that I have you guys swim like really, really fast tempos. In other words, the stroke rate was really fast. And you guys are like, really, my ears are burning. You guys are hating on me. And then we'd come back, we come back up or slow back down. And you'd find that a lot of, as we went down, were certain, you know, stroke rates were very uncomfortable as we were going down the scale or getting faster and faster. We came back up, you know, those stroke rates that initially seemed really fast suddenly weren't, they feel, well, I could maybe hold on to the stroke rate. You know, I can actually swim at this rate. And that is, one is waking up those fast twitch muscles, right? We always talk about fast twitch, you know, getting those circuits to fire quicker. And two, you know, when you're swimming at those faster tempos, those weird moves that we end up introducing in our stroke, you know, our little hand moves and, you know, and stuff we do underneath the water, or leg splays, they are not as pronounced because you don't have the time, you know, to do those movements. So as a consequence, you're actually trimming up those movements. It's much like I equate that to, I think they call it strides in running. You know, you do strides, you do that quick turnover. And it's not that you're going to be running a marathon at that pace, but it's actually trimming up your stride. So taking out those added unnecessary movements. But it also helps you change gears. So if you're in open water, in certain cases where it's really clean conditions, and what I mean by clean is that smooth, right? There's not a lot of swell, not a lot of chop. You can kind of turn up your stroke rate and get up to a speed that you're very comfortable with. But then when it gets really choppy, often you have to time, you know, you have to slow things down quite often, not speed things up, but slow it down to time yourself with the chop so you stay underneath in the surface rather than trying to swim over the chop, which you see a lot of triathletes do and just end up getting turned upside down sometimes. You really learn how to really penetrate right below the chop. And I remember with Bridge to Bridge, we had some pretty bumpy conditions, and he was a great example of just a torpedo, you know, going right underneath the surface and timing his stroke with the chop. And it could be a little faster, but typically end up kind of slowing things down. So doing that in the pool is great, you know, one for, you know, physical and physiological reasons, but also you having a range of gears that you can use in open water because you're not going to just swim at one stroke rate. You're going to be changing that rate depending on what the conditions are, the currents, you know, going left or right, or pushing you in, or pushing behind you kind of thing. Or, you know, if you have chop kind of diagonally, you know, how do you handle that? You know, you change gears so you can stay as low as possible. So doing that in the pool, doing open water, it's not only fun, it's engaging, right? But it's also training your body that it's not just a one speed only. You're not a fixie, right? On the water, you have 11 gears to work with, and you know, you have your choice, and you've you've swam in all of them, and you get to pick which one is best.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you start gearing towards the bridge to bridge swim. So we started heading towards that direction. So tell us about the bridge to bridge swim and kind of the conditions and things it faced. This is up in San Francisco Bay.
Sure. Jen loves cold water, so I figured it would be a great way to start her.
Perfect spot for her to swim then. Yeah, right.
She would never get in the cold water, and she was not going to get in the cold water. And it wasn't that cold that day. I think it was 64. But bridge to bridge is it's a 10K, maybe a little more or a little less in distance. But we swim what we call at flood, which means if you think of the San Francisco Bay, it's just that little opening compared to the gigantic bay that runs almost 60 miles, from end to end. And what they call the Bay Area, this North Bay and the South Bay. So water comes in right through the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's like things move very fast. And so it depends on the tide. So flood is when you're moving from low tide and real low tide, and it starts going to high tide. So we call the bay is starting to fill. And then so as it's starting to fill, it's like a river going in, to the bay. So you're actually getting, it's like riding your bike with a tailwind. It's really awesome, but you don't get initial tailwind. We start at what they call slack. So there's that time about 30 minutes, I think, or so, depending on the moon, really, and the time of year. But in the summertime, it's generally about 30 minutes. So we jump off during slack, and then we ride the Golden Gate Bridge, and we start swimming towards Alcatraz. And then about 20 minutes in, then it starts to fill. It's not like it's full speed, so it takes a while to get up to speed. And by the time, we get around to Alcatraz, which is about 3 miles in, it's getting close to, full flood or full speed, it can be anywhere from 4 to 6 knots. Jeez. So from Alcatraz or Aquatic Park there, or where people are most familiar with is Fisherman's Wharf, which is kind of right that area. That's where you're swimming. That's where I get to swim. My 100-yard pace was like 48 seconds on my watch. And I was like, wow, man, I'm cruising an Olympian.
So Mike's average pace. Got it.
Yeah, Mike's average pace, right?
Mike is cooking, right? He's
Mike's down to 24 seconds.
Pretty much, yeah. And so that last half, the last 3 miles, distance-wise, you're swimming pretty much at full speed, which is really fun because how often you get to swim from one bridge to another, and yeah, it's a 10K, but it ends up being 3.5, 4 miles, depending on. But the sights are wonderful, and this last race, was there was both Mike and Jen's first time in the Bay, right, Jen? First time swimming in the San Francisco Bay. So nice. It's really awesome. We had some pretty bumpy conditions because some currents will come around, they collide, and you get this weird kind of this lateral chop, that kind of throws you off. And that's where sometimes swimmers will try to climb over it. Well, I know Mike was going right through it, even though I didn't see him, because Mike, he was 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes ahead of the next swimmer. That's how fast
he was 17 going. Minutes.
What's that?
17 minutes?
Oh, 17 minutes. 17 minutes.
I believe so.
I think it was the biggest lead of any prior race with Waterworld swim that any swimmers had. And, it's just, it's a torpedo, that posture, that position, that background of having those kind of, that fluid stroke really sent him through, like a missile. And then, I was closer to the mid pack or a little bit behind. Jen was like, I think you were third female in, or third person in, right?
I think 15th overall.
15th overall. But these are against swimmers that are all there was a lot of young, very fast kids there, but they were all, I would call them San Francisco Bay swimming veterans. I mean, they have done a lot because they all live up there. Most of them live up there. And so here comes Mike, and they were like, who is this guy? But that's when you swim in the Bay, you swim in relationship to the current, because you're not going to swim against a 4 knot current. You're going to stay in place. So it's really depending on the tides and when things happen. They have, of course, Escape from Alcatraz, which all triathletes are probably really familiar with. It's a great race. They swim from Alcatraz over to Crissy Field, which is about about a mile and a half, about a mile and a half, or maybe 2 miles due west of Fisherman's Wharf, or about a mile from the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's just kind of this big kind of right hook. So they start at slack and get across the bay, and then what they call it, the current starts to ebb, which means now the bay is going from high tide to low tide. So now it's a river going out of the bay, underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. So you end up getting across the bay, or if you get across the bay quick enough, then you get a tailwind all the way in the finish. And it's about 2.2 miles as a crow flies for Escape from Alcatraz. But with the current, it's about a mile and a half swim. Might be a little bit shorter depending if it's a little faster current. So in the bay is really quite challenging because the current is so drastic and it moves very quick between high and low tides. You really kind of have to time your swims based on which way the tide is going. Otherwise, you might find yourself, ebbing out below the Golden Gate Bridge and never find you again. They'll find you.
Yeah. Eventually, you pop up on the score. I know we did that one the year before. Mike, you and I did that one. You convinced me to jump off a perfectly good boat near the island of Alcatraz. It was probably my best open water swim, and it literally almost barrel rolled several times with the chop that we had. It was really choppy. So I think we're all going to have to go up, and Kenny, you should join us as well. Go up and do the 10K swim next summer. Go back.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do on that one.
Yeah. So how did you make that? What did you do training wise? So leading up to doing this, when did you make the decision to go up? Because Stu's always putting that in everybody's ears. We got to go out there. We got to go out there. We got to do it. So what was the timeline? How many months did you guys start prepping for this? And what was the training that you're doing? Because you're swimming, you said, every single day in Santa Monica Bay, right? What did that training look like? How did that all come about?
We had a few months that, Stuart, you told us about it, and then I just do whatever Mike tells us we're going to do. He's like, we started doing a mile, and then we started doing 2 miles, because I was like, it's 25-minute drive over there. So 2 miles became nothing. Then 3 miles, for me, 2 days in a row, 3 miles is hard for me. Mike can just keep, I'm like, honey, you're like a cruise ship. It doesn't matter the conditions are. They can be wavy, choppy, calm, whatever. And you're just, and I feel like I'm the dinghy, still trying to keep up. So he'd be like 3 miles, that's a long way. If you count how many stroke cycles you do, we only stop at the turnaround. So continuous stroke cycles, it's a lot. So we would do 3 miles, maybe 2 days in a row, but I would get really tired. And then the third day we'd only do 2. And then Mike's like, we got to do a 5 miler. I'm like, okay, but we're stopping for snacks. We're stopping for snacks, but I still would have to sometimes with him. And I'm so appreciative, and it's so comforting to have, I need him next to me. When I breathe, I would tell him, I want to look at your face. I don't want to see your buoy. I don't want to see your feet. For me, it's very important to see his face, or I feel like my own rhythm goes off. So he would very, very good at just staying next to me. So I always say it's stroke, stroke, breathe, because I breathe both sides. So stroke, stroke, breathe, look at him, stroke, stroke, breathe, go that way. And then just to keep that, and then stop for some snacks on the way. And then sometimes I would just really have a hard time. And he would just say, are you okay? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm okay. So a couple of days we had to go separately. And that's when I was like, do whatever you want. I'm not going another 5 miler. Because supposedly, according to Stuart, this 10K will be like a 3 mile swim. So I figured if I could do an hour and a half swimming, which we were doing all the time on 3 miles, I could do the 10K.
That's one of his Jedi mind tricks. It's really like a 3 mile. Yeah, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. You'll be fine.
I'm going to borrow that if you don't mind.
Because if you say you want to swim the Catalina, Mike will go, okay, I'll go. And I'm like, what? But he'll go 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles. It's just nothing. But it takes a lot out of the average person. I'm like, do you understand the body you have? You don't get tired. It's very consistent. I might get tired and we might float another way, or, you feel everyone's tired, but his consistent pace is just amazing. So I'm quite happy to have to try it a little harder, because it helps me to stay consistent. Whereas I would be all over the place of, slow, fast, I'm tired, floating. When's this going to end?
Yeah. And that's certainly swimming with someone who's faster, better than you is what drives you along, especially with the fact that Mike will buffer back to just be that.
Yes.
You always used to work, you want to be 10% better, right? And then you can keep track with that. If you work way too to your fullest, then you can't keep up and you get discouraged. But if you can just stick that carrot out there just a little bit, and then you've got something to pull along with. Mike, you're fantastic doing that. I mean, and Mike, leading up to this, you had hip replacement surgery, right?
Yeah, well, I had a hip replacement in April, which, by the way, don't Google and watch the YouTube surgery before you have it. Not a good idea.
And this was a full replacement?
And he goes, no, don't do that. Yeah, which I did. Not bad idea. But no, I think, that was part of the reason, but I can't remember when we entered. I didn't actually enter us, just to correct what Jennifer was saying. Jennifer went ahead and she did mention it, but she entered us because it's like, it's one of those things you talk about. I was like, I wasn't really keen on swimming a bridge. I thought I'd just stick with that swim we did from Alcatraz, because that was actually a really, really choppy swim, Tom. That one we did, that was one of the choppiest ocean swims I've ever been in. I mean, it was really choppy.
I'm glad you said that.
But no,
because I don't want everyone saying it. It was like, that was one hell of a choppy swim. I was like, no, Mike is saying that too. So I'm like,
that race we came in, and I was swimming beside another gentleman coming into the, where you come into the little area where they train there off the
Aquatic Center?
San Francisco club area. Yeah. And we were came in, and we kind of look at each other, like just slugging it out. And I just remember we kind of look at each other, and I'm thinking, man, I'm going to give this one more go, one more push, just, balls to the walls. And if it doesn't work, this guy can have it. I'm done. I'm just shutting down, And I did one more push. And he just faltered. I'm like, oh, thank you. And then we could kind of just sort of coast in. And he was, because I was like, just once, it's that whole story about hanging on, just hang on as long as you can. It was just a lucky swim. But getting back to the preparation, I don't remember me actually entering us, but what we did for the training was the nice thing about ocean swimming, and I think if it's just more of a mind thing, because every day the conditions are different. And so you can relate the training. You really don't have to do anything. I just go out there to try to relax. And I think if anyone that's trying to get into any type of swimming event, or it's in the pool, because it's a natural flight where you tighten up in the water, whether you're in a pool, or ocean, or river, or whatever. So the relaxation, it's just almost like meditation for me. At least I've been treating it like that. And I just feel like it's like a mind cleansing when I go out there. And I just chug along, and I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and I think about all the good times, and I just really try to make it a therapeutical type of event, and so if it's like a currents, you got currents involved, so you might push one way. Some days Jennifer is like, she's very modest. She's there's a little bit, you can tell, you can feel when someone's kind of pushing a little bit, or trying to push a little bit to. Well, that was later on. That's actually other funny story too, because we have friends. Jennifer's good friend who she just got to visit with from college days way back when in the 80s. I communicate with her husband. I've become friendly with, which he went to the same school we did to, Alabama. And he asked a question about, well, you guys use fins? And we never thought about it. And we looked at each other. So we sent a little video. It's like, the look you get when someone says you use fins. It's like, there's no way we would use fins. So then we thought about it the next day. It's like, actually, that's not a bad idea. So, it's sort of willing to try anything. So Jen slipped fins on, and it was actually a really good idea. And, just again, it's another thing for anyone wanting to getting involved into something like that. It's another thing. The fins they make these days too. There's a couple of brands that make the same type of fin. It kind of reminds me of America's Cup sailing with the winged keel. The fins are designed so they keep you in, again, talking about what Coach Stuart's talking about, alignment, keeping in line, keeping that body on the rails. So you're being relaxed, but going straight on the track. You don't want to be moving all over the place. These fins actually help, and you don't even have to use them. They usually sort of float back there, and they actually can help with your technique. But yeah, that was kind of funny. And that's, again, you're just willing to try things out and relax. But as far as the preparation, yeah, I always like to, whether, I want to make it and not, I want to make it, put it that way. I don't want to be, washed in ashore. So I did like to go like a 5-mile swim. And so I went out and did a couple of those. But we did enjoy. Remember James, Jen? We met this gentleman, James, English gentleman. He works in the industry out in LA. He's, don't want to get into that, but he's a super, super nice guy. And he would meet us every morning too, and have a cup of tea, and always have a cup of tea afterwards. And we just so enjoyed his company. And we'd go out and we'd swim, at that speed too. And again, that was another example of changing it up, and where you can swim with all levels of swimmers. So as far as the preparation, it was more just like letting the sort of being one with nature and trying to, work with what you had. You got the ocean to get out through the back of the waves. And Santa Monica, Southern California, you can get a pretty nice swell sometimes. Not like Nazare, but you get a 3 or 4 foot wave, and that doesn't sound very high, but that's quite a big wave, especially if they're barreling on you. So you got to be a little bit careful. But again, so you've got that getting out through the break, coming back in through the break. So you're getting a workout really without even thinking too much about it. Maybe sometimes it's survival, just getting out. So you are getting, ducking down and you're getting a workout that way. So yeah, the preparation is very, very relaxed versus, if you're getting ready for an Ironman, the ultra distance ones you do, Tom, it's a little bit more specific, but, and that's part of the reason why I like it too, because it's just such a relaxing, it's a more of a mind thing to do with me, and with Jennifer too. I think, as it alluded to, Jen's my oxygen, so to speak. Yeah, so to the hydrogen. Yeah.
Like what Stuart taught us is like, I don't use the fin. I say I don't use the fins. I do let them drag behind me, but for my body position, it just seemed to put me high up. And I would do a little learning from Mike. I would go underneath him. I'm like, what is he doing? He never even kicks. And I would see his hips naturally go like this, swivel from side to side. And he watched me, he goes, yeah, you don't move your hips. And, Stuart, you talk about that hip driven stroke. And they talk about it since I was a kid, but like no one shows you how to do it. So, you try to thrust that hip forward and your kick will just kind of follow with one little thing. So I felt like the fins gave me a even higher position, even with the full wetsuit on with those fins, gave me that ability so that Mike could swim at a very nice cruisy pace. And that I hated to feel like I was slowing him down. So when we did meet with James, I would slow down to swim with James, and he was quite a bit slower than me. And Mike would go off on his own. But through Stuart and learning from him, I was able to give James some focal points, which helped him tremendously. Got him from him being like, I can't go this slow because it's so cold, to, hey, I'm actually enjoying this swimming next to James. And then he had to get a knee replacement the week before Mike got a hip replacement. And
Jen, we'll keep that between us.
And you've mentioned twice now on focal points, and I just want to kind of dive in that for a little bit. When you said it, or Stu, or what do you mean by that? What specifically?
Stuart gives us a lot to think about when we're swimming. So you become a thinking swimmer. So for me, I would take very long breaths, and I kind of attribute that to swimming in that humidity and having that exercise-induced asthma. And I would take a breath, and it's always like, it's like I'm breathing through a straw. So I think in swimming, I was always taking a very long breath. And Stuart says, we got to do these quick breaths and get your face back in the water before your hand starts to pull. Now, if anybody can slow down to think, I don't know, a lot of people probably do it correctly, but it has taken me years to master that one little detail. And when you're out in the open water and you are in choppy water, I was like, this is why he wants us to take a quick breath. Because if you take a long breath, you're going to get hammered with all that water, which isn't fun to swallow. So I've kind of, the focal point for me is swim next to Mike. And first of all, be relaxed, but like stay next to him. Don't let him drift too far. Don't go too slow. And my focal point today is take your breath, get your face back in quickly before I let that lead arm pull. That's just one focal point. And then the hips are the other things that really helped me. I mean, Mike actually went under the water and took my hips and just did a nice kind of a hard turned my hips. And I was like, oh, now I see, I'm going to turn my hip. That drives my arm a little further. It's distance per stroke. Swim smarter, not harder. Take less strokes and it's easier and you go faster. So there's a few, but every time I go out there, I know once I start swimming, I figure out what am I going to work on today? Maybe just one thing. So if I looked at your stroke and I could, and actually, and Stuart's taught me so much, but I can see something quickly that I'll be like, I could probably tell him this one focal point and that would change him if he would focus on it, you'd be a changed swimmer.
Stu, is that part of that? I mean, obviously part of it is to get better at the swim. Is the other part of it, because there's this, it's amazing to see the amount of tension that, and you guys know this more than I do, to go from a pool swim to an open water swim. I personally like open water better because you can get into a rhythm. I mean, there is legions of people that absolutely freak out. Stu, does a focal point kind of help like focus your mind on something else besides the whole freak out motion? Or where do you see that breakdown occur between that perfectly fine swimmer in the pool and all of a sudden they're really struggling kind of in that open water? Is it just because it's just too much? Is it just because of current and because of waves, because of where do you see that kind of, and how can they kind of break through that?
It's really all of the above. And what the focal point, I mean, it's kind of shutting out the environment. And, a focal point could also be, thought of as a very specific cue, like Jen was saying, making your breath early and get it quick so you stay in posture while you swim. It could be something as simple as keeping your fingers soft, not tighten them up, right?
Yeah.
No tension, just holding your fingers soft, keeping your head in line with your spine, just thinking about that, not trying to manage, the whole process. Because if you think about freestyle or really any stroke, it's like ballet, it's a very complex set of movements. And if you try to manage all of them and then throw in the environment, then the primal brain takes over, right? The reactive, Mike said it, the fight or flight. And then suddenly your body collapses, you get all this tension, you start to hyperventilate, the environment has now taken over and now your body's on autopilot trying to survive. And this is where you see, like in trial, especially they go on the first buoy, you see about 10% of swimmers, they're pretty much in survival mode. You're vertical, thank God for wetsuits, so you can float, but they're recovering because the environment took over, primal impulses took over, and then, it takes a while to recover from that. And it even happens to me occasionally, where I'll inhale some water and suddenly that fight or flight, will take over. And it's much like, I think of primal impulses, if you're walking along or you're running a marathon, and you get a little tired or something, and then suddenly you trip, right? And your mind, your brain goes into autopilot, says, I am going to protect you, and your hands and feet will go out to brace for impact without you consciously doing it. And that's what I see with a lot of swimmers, especially going from that nice calm pool to the open water. Suddenly they're getting pushed around, right? They haven't felt that. So it's like someone, if you're running down a crowd and someone was kind of shoving you, you could still stay up, upright, or you just trip, right? So you learn how to, it's the most difficult thing for, I would say this is just humans, as whether you're just starting swimming or even, a former Olympian, is that there's those points that your primal brain is going to take over. And you have to know when that happens and have cues, or what Jen talked about, focus points, to get you back into something very specific, to turn that primal fight or flight brain off, to get you, as Mike noted, into that kind of Zen, kind of relaxed state.
Yeah.
A relaxed state, not that you're a bowl of jelly, but that you are not tense from your primal brain taken over, and you want to move it to the conscious part. I call it the operational versus the creative. There's kind of an entertainment industry. The operation is always trying to take over the creative. You got to make more money, and the creative has to push back and say, wait a minute, I got to have time to develop, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of the creative mind saying, wait a minute, I'm in control here, not you, because if I allow the fight or flight to take over, the swimmer starts to sink. And the more you start to sink, the tenser you get, and the more those survival mechanisms turn on. And once that happens, oh man, it's really hard to get off of that edge. And when I normally tell swimmers, especially the novice swimmers, or even, intermediate or above, if they get into that state where they got kicked and suddenly, everything's tensing up and your whole body's collapsing, get onto your back and just relax, put your arms out, let your head just hang or float in the water, recover physically and recover emotionally, because that emotional part is the reactive brain, the primal brain trying to take over, telling the conscious brain, you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to save you. And so there's always kind of that struggle. Now you have to have both of them, right? You have to have the reactive brain, you have to have the conscious brain working together, but not one overwhelming the other, which is usually the reactive brain. And that's what happens in open water. As that environment changes, you get swimmers banging into you that it's never happened to you before in the pool unless you got really crowded. And then suddenly the body collapses and now you're in distress mode. And that's hard to come back from that edge, when that happens. So in the pool, what we would do, we'd try to pull lanes out sometimes. I mean, that was kind of fun. We'd pull lanes out and swim in big groups, to where you're close and bumping into one another. And then suddenly you think, okay, well, this is kind of fun. I kind of enjoy this. I don't have to have, my own space. I could swim in a very small space and bump into somebody every once in a while. And because now I know what to do. So putting yourself in those situations in the pool as best you can is also very, very helpful too.
Yeah. And it seems like there's a mindset. I mean, like Mike, what you were talking about, you're able to make it, rather than being an obstacle on waves or an obstacle on current, you turned it into, oh, this is going to be a different day. So it actually is fighting boredom rather than, oh my gosh, I've got chop, I've got swell, what am I going to do? And that's an easy thing for your brain to kind of flip into. It seems like you were able to go, okay, I get something different today. It's not just going to be a calm day today. I get something to think about, I guess. Would that be was that hard for you to do, or just because you grew up your
well, when you've done it like Jennifer and I for so long and competitive swimmers, you do a lot just intuitively, it's just, it's because it's like anything, you do enough repetition, whether it's right or wrong, you do it. But no, like you still, I'm just trying to think about basically someone that's just trying to get into swimming or maybe thinking about getting in the ocean. And I think it's relaxed, but then Stuart mentioned too, and then Jennifer's talking about that quick breath, and not to get too technical, but the reason it's you get that quick breath, you want to get back. It's also, you don't want to take water and talking about the flight a couple of times on this bridge to bridge, because I was, I had the red line going. I wasn't coasting, and a couple of times, if I had gotten a mouthful of water, I would have stopped me in my tracks. So you want to take that, but the other reason too, you take that quick breath. You always want to be in line. So like you don't want your head up, you don't want your head, out here, your body out. You're relaxed, but again, it's that I always, just Stuart talks about posture, and it's correct. And I try to simplify it even more for me. I'm always thinking about going down like train tracks. So I'm always trying to go down train tracks. So, your spine wants to be straight. You always want to be in that sort of rectangle. It's not a rectangle, but you want to be thinking of your body maybe as a rectangle. And so if your vessel, your body is getting off kilter, right? It's pretty much common sense. You're going to create resistance. You're going to create drag. Mm-hmm. So if you're just learning or you want to do that, that's where the fins can really help. The posture, the alignment, whatever word you want to use that, you can bring in yourself, the relaxation. But you think about it, you want to be like, the nose of one of the nuclear submarines that Australia is about to get, or, you want to have that nice straight line where you're dispersing the water up here and you've got nothing else that's hanging off, no pilot fish hanging off you, creating drag, it's really, I guess it's my age too, and where I'm at with, you go through all different things in your life that it's just, and maybe the pandemic too, but I really treat it more as a sort of a different each day. And this is sort of my time to, sort of decompress. And I think that's maybe more beneficial than trying to race someone, whereas 30 years ago, I'd be, that was like, just take each day, do what you can do.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen. Jen, posture is
as posture does. I don't know.
Come on. Cash is
king.
There you go.
Posture is
king.
Posture is king.
Posture is king.
Yeah, but what's amazing though is, Jen, with your resume, it's ridiculously, impressive. Yet Mike, you said I had to have Mike swim underneath me to get that feeling of what that hips, because what's fascinating is when Tom and I first started working together, he was like, "You're crossing your arms." I'm like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "No, you're crossing your arms." I'm like, "I'm not. It's out." And he shows me the video. I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And it's that.
Yes.
The hard thing.
That you've been doing it for however long you've been swimming.
Yeah.
You've been doing that. So it's the changes are very incremental. Like I said, it took me 4 years of and I had been swimming for most of my life. Not a good freestyler, but how much freestyle? We swim a lot of freestyle in practices, but to make those small changes was a focusing and paying attention to make those changes. So if you're probably not crossing anymore, but you're probably still a little bit too far in.
Oh, absolutely.
He's doing much better. He's doing much better now.
And Stuart, you would agree, you're going to feel like you're swimming out towards the lane lines, like you're super wide. And that's when you're going to be correct. And then, you guys are lucky if you're filming it or you got a GoPro or something like that is like just huge, because you can't see much in the ocean. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then you get in the pool and you see, it's like, oh my gosh, I thought I corrected that. And you're not.
And
perception and reality, right?
Yeah. And Jen, you were more of a sprinter. You were all about speed and what it was, backstroke and
butterfly.
Fly.
Mostly
so
backstroke. And for me, speed is like the gun goes off and the body's just going to react and I'm going to go. But I had to learn to really turn everything off. Stuart taught me how to turn everything off. And, even when he would maybe say, we're going to do sprints at practice, you wanted to take 12 strokes a lap, not 20.
Yeah. So would you say that, and this is for all three of you, would you say that if you're doing a sprint race, any imperfections in your stroke and in your posture, you can kind of get away with a little bit because you can overpower in certain aspects. And then once you start doing longer distance endurance kind of things, that's where it would show? Or is that completely wrong?
Sprint races, like the sprint triathlons, if you can pay attention to the detail and you can be smarter about your training, about fixing up your swim stroke, your cycle stroke, like doing the one-legged repeats on your bicycle. You're going to be way more efficient on that 10-mile bike ride than you were if you were just pedaling. And there's a lot of athletes out there like myself that we were really good athletes or top in our, strokes or whatever, but like there's still a lot of faults. I had a lot of faults in that freestyle that I would have never corrected if I didn't meet Stuart. But you have to be willing. A lot of people that are decent, I don't know that they're willing to listen. And I remember telling Mike, I really want you to come to the swim practice. And Mike had just finished a stint coaching distance swimmers at the University of Alabama a few years ago. So I was like, I know you know how to coach. I don't be a jerk. Like, I really like this guy. And like, your shoulders are hurting.
Don't ruin it for me.
Please don't ruin it. You obviously can fix something in your stroke because he wouldn't swim me. My shoulders hurt, blah, blah, blah. So obviously Stuart was able to give him a couple of minor changes that he's swimming pain-free. He's never swum pain-free before, but he had to be willing to listen. And at first, Stuart, when you go to your practices, from those of us that are coming from, we're in our 50s, but college programming and teaching really competitive stuff, to see it broken down that much, it's even Mike, he was like, what are we doing? I'm like, I know, he's breaking it down to this is a complicated stroke. But if you accept it, what the coach is telling you, and think about it and make the correction in any kind of sprint thing, you're going to be that much better. Minutes.
Yeah.
I think Coach alluded to earlier about making the changes. So it's just not easy. When you think of it, even if you've been only doing swimming, 6 months, you think of how many strokes you've done, and if you're doing it incorrectly, it just gets embedded in your, in your brain. So to make a change, it's really, really tough. It's hard. It's not will change or anything like that. But if you to make a change, you've really got to, obviously have a good coach, listen, and then just try not to get frustrated. You will, but try not to get frustrated. And it's just little changes. And just personally, one of the things that coach, helped me was I felt like I was pointing my hands out to the corners of the pool, and I probably have regressed back to how I used to swim a little bit, but that's talking about, when we're going out and Jennifer's talking about focal points earlier. That's one of the ones I do try to focus on. I try to, I'm trying to feel like I'm pushing out. I'm probably not. And the other thing is I had this deal where I'd lift my elbow up, and I try to push down now. And so, there's little things, but, it's not easy. So don't, for people that get frustrated, that's to be expected. You just got to kind of hang in there and just little increment changes, but it's like 3 months, I think, is basically a good 90 days. If you're just trying to subtly make a change, it's just not, it's not going to happen overnight.
And you're hard to let go of your ego. So if you're a triathlete, everyone's got their ego in a swim practice. And then, take yourself out of lane 2 and go swim in lane 4 or 5 and correct these imperfections. Exactly. People aren't like, if I was a runner and you watched me run and you just gave me one tidbit, like, Jennifer, relax your shoulders and let your arms go. Well, and then, okay, we're going to go 10 400s around the track.
Yeah.
Well, I have to be smart enough to be like, you know what, maybe I'll go, but I'm going to run with this group that's going to go. I'm going to go a little slower because I really want to relax my shoulders. But a lot of people,
and I think they
want to take the time.
Yeah, I think they also find a lot of these master's programs, right, where they want to get, called, late onset swimmer, where they find a master's program, they get in there and they're just throwing up sets and they're just hammering this stuff out. And so many people I hear about there is like, oh, this master's program, I didn't really like it, so I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. And I can say when Stu was telling me about the master's program, I was just kind of like, I was reluctant because I don't do well in that atmosphere. If I get into that thing where it's just all ego based and here's your set and start hammering it out, and it's like everyone's watching to see who's faster or whatever and moving up in the lanes, and I just don't like that at all. But the way Stu's coaching us was completely different, and he kept us on track, but making it fun, but allowing us to to get into that mode. And it's just like all of us thrive in that situation. It was like, boom.
Take care of it on race day.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I'll take care of it on race day. And I knew the people that would come to try out his program that wouldn't come back. And they were the people who were high school swimmers maybe, and they were pretty decent, but they were thinking they were going to come in and we were going to do these, set after set after set. And yet, because they would maybe race me. And I'm like, I am so not here to race anybody.
Yeah.
It's the thinking. I'm tired mentally at the end of a proper practice. You're tired mentally. And just give me time. And then, a couple of people, they went over to a different team because they wanted to work harder. But then I was like, I'll see it.
Exactly. And they're like, well, we only did 2,000 yards tonight, right? I need to get more. I need to get more yards. We didn't do enough. We only did 1,500. Yeah. But 1,500 of focused yards is way better than doing 3,000 yards of crap, form.
And any discipline, cycling or running, the train smarter, not harder, the world needs to listen to. Yeah. So what would your advice be to new swimmers? I'll call them the late onset, beginner swimmers that want to get into this thing, if they're looking for a master's program or what they're doing, what advice would you give them? I would still say go and show up, talk to the coach, and let a little bit of maybe if you're brand new, you don't have an ego about swimming because you don't know much about anything, but go to those slow lanes and stay in them longer than you want to, and ask the coach to come and give you some stroke correction, because most coaches probably aren't giving stroke correction. When I go home in Florida, my coach that coached me when I was 12, he's still coaching. I go up to see him at the 6 a.m. Masters workout, and I'm like, Coach, like, you tell us to do 10 100s and nobody stops. He goes, they don't listen to me. And so nobody wants to listen to, he goes, I stop. I just give them a set and everybody pushes off and does their own thing. But if I try to give them a stroke correction, they don't do it. So my thing is talk to that person, like join a team, join a master's club, but show up, have a conversation, and then get a little bit of stroke correction and stay in those easy lanes until you're like, moving along and you feel like you're progressing, but don't do an incorrect stroke and go into a hard set. It's just silly.
Yeah. Coach, what's your advice? And I think we're getting close to wrapping up on time. So, what else, what advice would you give to a new swimmer coming through? I mean, certainly to check out the master's program. And if you don't like it, don't feel like you have to stick with it. I mean, move on and find another one. There's a lot more of them certainly popping up out there.
I'll just adding to Jen. I mean, I think it's good to find a program, and you can make it your own. I mean, it's really your own practice. I mean, you don't want to deviate and make yourself stand out from the group if they're doing a certain set of sets. Like Jen says, you can always go to the slower lane and work on something. Like if I'm working on breathing only, or and my cues are getting the head back in, keeping my body long, holding posture. Those are my 3 cues. I'm going to do that in the slower lane, and do the same sets. If they break out the kickboards, I usually have an alternative. Work without the kickboard, really just kicking in posture, and then coming up for breath, and then not holding the board above your head, or putting the board below your stomach or your chest. And then talk to coach. Some coaches are really, I would say typically they're training swimmers how they were trained. And I don't want to say one's wrong, one's right, but that's just, it's working for them. They're going to continue with that. And just mention to the coach, I'm working on changing my stroke, and some things are very awkward, so I have to slow it down a little bit, and if you see me in a slower lane, this is probably why. So I'd say keeping that communication open, and letting the coach know what your intentions are, and that you want to be with the group, because the group does kind of keep you honest, right? And a group is camaraderie, and a group is it's fun. And, I think a little competition is always good. It just, not that it becomes the sole thing in a Masters, which I think often happens, especially in the faster lanes. It's like, it's nothing but a race for an hour and a half, right? And then that's just going to imprint things in your comfort zone, which may be incorrect. It may be hurting your shoulders. It may be, bending posture, this kind of thing. So I'd say join a group, and you can always find a way to fit in. And there's different ways that you can fit in without making it a big competitive march, through the whole practice, and making it just like, oh, I hate this. You'll find a way to make it work for each person, or for each person will find a way to make it work. Just keep the communication open.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I never enjoyed the swim portion of anything. And when I got involved with your master's class and got through, I was at a point where my swimming was so horrible. I was regressing. I was going backwards. I had a horrible swim at Hanu 70.3 where I practically drowned, came in dead last in the swim. Like, I was out there forever. And you just broke the stroke down to where we got back to just basic Superman glide, where we're just floating. Like, certainly broke it all the way down. That was hard for me to back down like that, but I had reached rock bottom pretty much. So I had nowhere else to go but up from that point on. But it was certainly taking the time and resetting my expectations to say, hey, this is where it needs to be. I need to really put the time and effort in, like Mike said, just keep working on it, and try not to overwhelm yourself with all the issues. Just break the focal points down to one or two at a time and just kind of build that foundation up. And I've tried to, put that into my coaching as well. So,
like Kenny, are you in the Masters at all?
I'm not.
And, it's really good while you're learning, and when you're working with a coach and you're changing your movement patterns from really terrestrial patterns to more of an aquatic pattern, or that works better in an aquatic environment, is not to do that in a Masters environment, because you're going to get kind of caught up in that environment anyways. Get those patterns to the point where they're more natural. They don't feel like, oh my God, this is not how you swim. This is so awkward. Because anything that you're changing, any movement patterns in any sport, if you're changing a position different from what you've been doing it's going to feel very awkward. And awkward is good as long as it's not painful. So get past that awkwardness, get those patterns kind of honed in, a little bit really connected, and then that would be a good time to start, going into a Masters and continuing in that mindset. So changing, like Mike said and Jen said, when they just treated, when they're just more and more, on the swim teams and stuff, from young kids all the way through college, to being more mindful of what you're doing, but not managing the whole process. And then you feel that level of, I really feel comfortable now in this new position. Now I can start to extend the time and the distance. And that would be a good time to kind of think about going into a Masters, not every day, but maybe twice a week, maybe then 3 times a week, and then kind of, slowly breeze in that way. And I think that'd be very helpful for all swimmers. And, for novice swimmers, I always get said posture's key. And Jen noted fins. Fins are great, not for propulsion, not to help you move, which a lot of swimmers use them to move. It's to really make the body longer all the way through the toes. And what the fins do is they help you point your toes. And I say, point your toes like a ballerina, like on tippy toes. Because when you point your toes, you engage your hip flexors. You engage your hip flexors, you engage your glutes. You engage your hip flexors, your glutes. Now the hips, the pelvis is taking over. And now the pelvis is in charge. And remember, what was my mantra a couple of years ago? Power from the
pelvis.
Power from the pelvis.
Yeah. So the fins make you longer.
I can see the t-shirts now.
Yeah.
Power from the pelvis. The fins make you longer. They get you to point your feet where, most swimmers they'll be cycling in the water. You see dorsiflexed feet, and they'll be cycling or running in the water. Long bodies, long legs, pointed toes, really compact kick. The fins really help in aiding posture all the way through the toes and engaging those hip flexors. That is where the power is at.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I know, Coach, you've got to jump off. Any final words from everybody as we wrap up? I want to thank you all for being here. I mean, I think this is a great conversation. I miss you guys. I really do. I love swimming with you and being around you. Is such great energy and all that. Just any final words as we wrap up and head off?
I just say, keep it fun, keep it relaxed. If you find a person that you run with or you cycle with or you swim with that, like what Stuart taught us, critique each other. I learned something from Roger Holzberg, who's not a strong swimmer, but he told me something and I was like, oh, he's right. This is something I need to focus on. But most people, if you're with somebody who's better than you, you tend to maybe not want to, but I'm telling you, even Mike had changes to make in the stroke. So everybody, if you can have someone to train with that's open to critique or just a little helpful hint, I say go for it.
Yeah.
Like, in our practice, there wasn't one coach on deck. I should say one coach there. There was one coach on deck, maybe sometimes two, but I had, 15, 20 coaches in the water because they were giving each other, there's that peer-to-peer kind of review, hey, your head's starting to come up, your breath is a little late, you're laying flat. Those kind of just simple cues to remind you to get back to that, you're going back to that comfort zone, to get back to that zone that is more aquatic friendly and streamlined. Really
empowered us to do that. Empowered us. It can feel bad if I was going to pull on Tom's leg to say, hey, Tom, you're like that right arm is not doing something right. And you would not take offense at it. Like none of us would take offense. So once you can foster that environment, I think it just opens everybody up to getting a little bit better.
That's huge. And that's a, a testament to Coach Stu, because that was the environment that he built. And we just, like I said, we thrived in that. And my goal is out here is to find a pool where I can start a program similar to that. That's my goal. I just need to find the right place and build. I know I have 2 or 3 athletes that I'm coaching now that would thrive in that same environment. So that's been a goal of mine to continue that on. So, Kenny.
Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kenny. Great meeting you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, really
thanks
love
for coming
having you. Love having you guys on. We learned so much from you. Really appreciate it. To everybody out there who's listening, please, your comments and feedback is important to us. Giving us, thumbs up, 5 stars, all of that good stuff helps the algorithms and helps people find this podcast. And certainly your feedback kind of steers us on the guests and things and subjects you want to talk about. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate everybody's time. And we'll catch you on the next one.